Hello, hello, and welcome, everyone. Oh, I think I'm zoomed in a little bit too much here. Let's see if I can. All right, well, we'll go. Oh, something seems a little bit off on the color or the resolution or something. Let's see if we can. Anyway, it doesn't surprise me at all that something would be off today. I've been sick, but I didn't want to cancel today's live stream because this is our 50th episode of 2024, the last episode of the year, and I think it's the first year since I started doing this that I actually did a full 50 episodes in 1 year. Okay, let's see if that makes things any better. Well, I don't know if that's any better, but I got some weird artifacting happening. Anyway, it doesn't surprise me at all that we're having technical difficulties on the last show of the year. Technical difficulties also health-wise, but technical difficulties technically wise. But I didn't want to cancel. I wanted to at least try to get online. I pumped myself full of Dayquil and NyQuil and all kinds of stuff to make myself marginally presentable. And maybe this is the perfect ending to 2024. I don't know what your 2024 was like, but I described it as a bit of a non-year in terms of what happened. For me, 2024 felt like it was a false start. The only thing of any but that false start seems to have prepped both in macrocosm and microcosm, prepped for 2025 and beyond. I wanted to go through with today's live stream because I wanted to give everyone an opportunity to share your thoughts or your feelings, any intuitions that you might have. Because I too have some strong intuitions about the future. There are some big changes coming. By the way, there's the link if you want to pop on the live stream and share your thoughts. There are some big changes coming. There is movement on the horizon. And I'm not going to say whether that movement is good or bad, because those terms don't mean anything. Those terms only have meaning from a subjective point of view. Change is coming, and that change is necessary, one way or another. That the changes are what they are, and they will be what they need to be. And it will be our task on an individual level and indeed on a collective level, if we are able to come together in locally in small groups or thematically, intellectually around the world, or nationally or internationally, globally as a humanity. On all of those levels, our response to the coming changes are going to be very meaningful and very telling. Again, on an individual level and on a collective level, on local, regional, national, and an international basis, humanity-wide basis. There are many people out there who are speculating along many different lines, many different avenues. of the changes that are coming. And many of them have a sort of, what's the right expression, dire outlook for various different areas and aspects. Some people are predicting war. Some people are predicting economic downturn, if not outright decline and demise, i.e. the petrodollar, the American dollar, and many such outlooks. I personally don't deny the veracity of such predictions. It is inevitable in the Kali Yuga, certainly, right? That's the Eastern term for the end times. But all things come to an end, all things die. And in that process of death, as we all know, one way or another, we have all experienced someone or something close to us, be it a family member, a friend, a pet, going through old age and death. We have all witnessed that in some way, shape, or form. Even if it's a plant that you had in your house that ran its course, or some cut flowers that just withers and dies. The law of entropy applies, and I really do feel strongly that movement along that lines is going to become more apparent and more acute. The entropy that we have experienced thus far has been contained, and it is subtle. It is not obvious to most people. To some people, they can see this preparation, but they have to surmise and extrapolate and deduce based on their observations. But the vast majority, if they have any inkling of, things coming apart at the seams, as it were, it's really a gut feeling that they have. It's very difficult to point to something specifically and say, there, you see, this is an indication of the unraveling of the social fabric or the crumbling of the foundations of civilization. Now, it's not that those indicators aren't present. They are. And in 2024, one of the key indicators really rose to prominence. And that indicator was the overreach of Hollywood and the media and the so-called woke movement. Their overreach in terms when it comes to this whole transgender issue and transgenderism. The forceful way in which they were injecting the transgender agenda into popular culture across the board, including video games, including television and films but most alarmingly into children's programming. The way in which that activity was ratcheted up was a clear sign to many that something has gone terribly awry. Now, of course, I would be remiss not to mention the aspect of sports and transgender males competing in female sports and demanding the right to use women's washrooms and women's change rooms and women's showering facilities. And just recently, I saw an interview with a psychologist who has psychiatrist or psychiatrist. Anyway, he has spent his career studying individuals with, let's say, more extreme psychological cases. And he states outright that that which we call transgenderism is that all transgender individuals that he has ever diagnosed, they all fell on the autism spectrum. They all had autism. And that a great deal of gender-related issues or sexually related fetishes. So, for example, transvestites have now been lumped into transgenderism. And he makes it clear in this interview, and I should really find this interview and share the link. I'll probably do that on my Facebook page after we're done here, because I'm not going to spend the time looking for it now, because the impulse will want to be to show it to you. But it's quite long. It's like, I think it's well over half an hour. And I can't do justice to everything that is said there. But one of the things that he notes is that what used to be simply considered transvestite, right? Men who enjoyed dressing up in women's clothes. Now that has been morphed and corrupted and twisted into the pot of transgenderism. And that the way in which counselors and teachers and child psychologists have been pushing and promoting transgenderism and sex reassignment procedures on children is very, very alarming. And from a psychiatric or psychological point of view, it's child abuse, according to this particular mental health expert. And as a result of his work and his writings and his research and his working with these individuals, he's been completely blacklisted and essentially like kicked out of all of the psychiatric associations, because he has gone against the grain. He's gone against the accepted dogma of gender and gender issues. But he points out, for example, that transvestites very often, that desire to dress up in women's clothing was power, was all about power and control and dominance. As you know, we've talked very often about the nature of fear and how fear is the dominant ego, that fear and lust are the two dominant egos that constitute and control this degenerated fallen humanity of mechanical hominids who call themselves human beings. It's fear and lust. And I've explained many, many times that fear is also control. And that these two things, fear and lust, Asmodeus and Lilith, they are a couple. They are related to each other, which is why you find dominance and submissiveness all wrapped up in sexuality. And this psychiatrist was explaining then that the transvestite male very often had a overbearing, over-dominant mother. And in order for him to assert or feel that he could assert dominance over the female sex, he put on the clothing, right? He would wear the garb, he would wear the armor, he would wear the uniform of the other sex. And that would make him feel, because he would look and feel more like his mother, who was the dominant force in his life growing up. And so that being a transvestite wasn't that the man wanted to be a woman or thought he was a woman. It had nothing to do with that. It had everything to do with submissiveness and dominance and wanting to assert his dominance over women. And he felt the only way he could do that, and the only way he could feel, ironically, like a man, more like a man, more dominant, more stronger, was to wear the suit, the outfit, the costume. It's perhaps the best word. The costume of his mother, who was the most dominant, domineering force in his life. And that he found this uniform across the experience of all transvestites that he had worked with. So the transgender and this whole gender issue, very often it gets conflated and convoluted and complicated with sexuality, when many, many, many times it is more about dominance and the individual. And that's why there are so many cases of individuals who regret their sex reassignment surgeries after the fact, years later or decades later, because they realized they were wrong. The psychologists and the counselors and everybody who had driven into their head that they were in the wrong body, that they were really a man in a woman's body or a woman in a man's body, that all of that counseling was incorrect, that really it was a form of gender dysphoria. It was a dominance issue. It was some kind of a trauma in their childhood that made them feel uncomfortable or made them feel more comfortable, made them feel uncomfortable in their current skin, or made them to believe that they would be more comfortable in the skin of the opposite sex. And very often it was this dominance, submissive dynamic, which is bundled up with sexuality. Obviously, it's bundled up in gender, but it doesn't necessarily mean that someone is a woman in a man's body or a man in a woman's body. But this issue is one of the issues that really dominated from a cultural, sociological perspective in the West. This is one of the issues where finally, people, put their foot down. And it's actually one of the reasons why Donald Trump won the election. Because conservatives and the Christian right and many progressives, in other words, Democrats, but who are more centrist leaning Democrats. They're not far left leaning Democrats, but they were ostracized by their own party for not being radical enough in their liberalism. But a lot of those liberals recognized that this gender stuff had gone too far, and that the grooming of children and the pushing of the transgender issues on children, that this had gone, that enough was enough, and they had to put their foot down, and they did. Number one, they rejected so much of Hollywood's blockbuster movies this year. Disney and several other studios that really forced this transgender agenda, those movies flopped phenomenally. They were outright rejected by general audiences. And so the Hollywood machine felt it in the pocketbook in a major way. And so too, the AAA gaming industry. Now, the video game industry dwarfs all other media combined, because when you sell a AAA game for $60, $70, $80 a pop, right? That's 10 times more than what you get for a movie ticket, or maybe 5 times more what you get for a movie ticket nowadays, because we have to add in inflation. But of course, the upfront development costs on AAA games and the time is likewise much larger. You're talking about 200, 300, 400, 500 million dollars easily over the course of 5 years, even 10 years to develop some of these AAA titles. And this year there were a few titles: Dragon Age Veilguard and Sony's Concordia, and there's some other ones that I can't remember the names, but they tanked in such a colossal way. They were such monumental flops that there are studios that have gone bankrupt and or have been bought out because their share value has just gone down, because some of these studios, they invest everything that they have and they borrow a great deal of money, and they put everything they have, all their eggs in one basket, to do one of these AAA titles, because the back end it is so enticing, and the revenues are so tempting, that and the demand for the quality, the fidelity, the high-res graphics, the realistic looking graphics, they have to have the staff and the expertise in order to create games of this high caliber. And there have been a number of these titles that have just, again, bombed in such a colossal way, outright rejected across the board by players. And as a result of this, by the end of the year, you had multiple studios, multiple heads of studios coming out and making statements, public statements, that they are changing course, they're changing direction, and that they will no longer be pursuing the woke agenda as they have in the past. They have clearly heard the feedback and felt it, where the only way that a corporation can really feel these things, and that's in the bottom line and in their share value, their share price. So this was one of those indicators, however, that things are beginning to unravel. And let's make no mistake, the academy, right, the universities have made no such statement. The universities are still going to be pumping out young people into the workforce who are indoctrinated into the woke mindset. And there are many studios that are still, like, if anything, this shift, and the shift of the needle, the pendulum swinging back towards the right politically in the United States, and globally, right-wing, more nationalistic, more conservative, more traditional, family-focused, traditional-focused, more religious, Christian-focused around the world, the pendulum has swung back to the right by the end of 2024, in direct reaction to the left overstepping its bounds, overreaching, believing that the hubris of those on the left, believing that they are on the right side of history and believing that they hold the high ground, the moral high ground, exactly the same way that the conservatives believe that they hold the moral high ground. And so because of that, you have these two factions, and the pendulum swings back and forth whenever either of these factions overreach and overstep their bounds and take things too far. That's when the pendulum swings back. And that's what we experienced by the end of 2024. And the key indicator of that was the overwhelming majority election win of Donald Trump. And so despite the fact that 2024 was a very entropic year in which not a lot happened, you can argue, the previous year, what began in the Middle East, and the war in Iraq that began prior, that's just was continuing, and the entropic changes, the shifts that were happening, has now resulted in this pendulum swing back to the right and back to conservatism. And what that means for 2025 may possibly lead to something even more entropic. And we'll get into that in a minute. But first, I have been woefully negligent when it comes to your comments. So let's get to some of those. Benjamin Ochoa says, I was just about to watch a YouTube video on the same subject, but it started off with a phrase that read sickness unto death with lab rats in the background to imply what is happening to society. And he also says, I hope you're doing well. And the video is 2 years old. I think either the video that he was referring to or the video I was referring to, one or the other. So I will dig up that video that I was referring to, and I'll share the URL with you. But so that, like, thinking back on 2024 and saying what else happened this year that is truly memorable, that like, feel free to sound off in the comments. What was defining in the macro picture for you? What did you feel was very important, or very, very telling, or the defining aspect of 2024? Another of obviously a major impact on all of our lives was inflation, and here in Canada especially, the housing bubble that we are in. When you combine the rising cost of living and the rising cost of housing, you have young people, more and more young people, fresh out of university into their first job, easily making, 50, 60, 70, $80,000 a year, and they can't afford to live. They can't afford to rent. They have to live at home with their parents, because there are cities in Canada where a room, not an apartment, but a room in a house or a room in an apartment is easily over $2,000 a month. Just a room. And if you can find such housing, bachelor apartments are, 3,000 or 4,000, and one bedrooms are up from there. And that there are many, many, many people, and new couples are finding it all but impossible to qualify for a mortgage, because there has been over the last decade here in Canada, we have had a prime minister who has basically been a puppet for the globalist agenda, and we've had an influx of migrants into Canada, many of which have obviously put tremendous pressure on an already dire housing situation in this country. Meanwhile, in some parts of the country, in some of the most expensive cities, there are upwards of 30% of housing inventory vacant. Because the property prices were skyrocketing, that many, many people have just bought for investment purposes. And many of the individuals who bought for investment purposes in places like Vancouver were from China. And they bought that property back when, even before Justin Trudeau got into power, the previous Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, he wanted to spur foreign investment in Canada. So he said that if you invest, I can't remember what the number was, $1 million or $2 million or something like that, you automatically get Canadian citizenship. There was a certain amount you had to invest. The problem was he didn't make a distinction between commercial and residential real estate. So a bunch of Chinese nationals, wealthy Chinese nationals, came and through Chinese real estate agents in Vancouver and British Columbia, they purchased huge swaths of residential condominiums and homes in places like Vancouver, and they purchased them never intending to move here or to occupy those homes. They purchased them for their children, who now could have, because they put the property in their name, they bought the property in their children's name. The children have Canadian citizenship. And when their children grow up, they can come to university and not as a foreign student, not paying foreign student fees. They'll pay the domestic Canadian fees because they're Canadian citizens, and they will have a condominium in downtown Vancouver to live in. And the families making these investments of these condominiums for their children, they don't want anybody living in them in the meantime. They're not going to rent them out. They're not going to furnish them and rent them out to some stranger. No. They're going to have their own children come and move into a pristine, never before lived in condominium. And so this is like something like 30% of the real estate market in certain cities fall into this category, and elsewhere around the country, it's the same thing. It's foreign investment or just domestic investors, but they're just buying it for pure speculation, and they don't want to. They don't want to deal with the hassle of renting them out. And the ones who do have rental units, there was the phenomenon of gentrification, the phenomenon of short-term rentals because of what's it called? Airbnb. So Airbnb became a very popular way for people to go to cities like Toronto and not, rent a hotel for the night. They would rent someone's condo for the night. And so a lot of the real estate investors, and this is common all throughout the United States and anywhere you go where there's a lake or a ski resort or, camping or hiking or, concert venues or sporting events venues, any location that qualifies as a tourist destination, the landlords recognized the opportunity that Airbnb provided them and said to themselves, why would I rent my unit for $1,000 or $2,000 a month when I can put it on Airbnb and get anywhere from $500 to $1,000 a night, or $2,000 a weekend, right? There's 4 weekends in a month, right? I can rent it monthly for $2,000, or if it's a popular tourist destination like Toronto, I can rent that unit for $2,000 for 4 weekends in every month, which is $8,000. That's 4 times what I could be making from that property just renting it monthly. And because Airbnb, all the software and everything is all set up, and right, it's like, and they would basically hire somebody to come in and do the unit prep, and they would hire a cleaning lady and everything, even if the maintenance, in order to accommodate and do the cleanup afterwards and everything else, for an Airbnb, even if the maintenance costs him $1,000 a month, that's still $7,000 a month. That's right. That's 3.5 times more than what he would be making, renting it monthly. And so you see this across North America and really elsewhere around the world as well. But it's really, for whatever reason, it took root here in North America. And as a result of this, we have this real estate bubble, because the values of this property has gone through the roof. And the Liberal government under Trudeau here in Canada just kept increasing the number of people they were letting into this country. Why? Because the flipping of houses, right, and the inflated real estate market was being reflected on Canada's GDP. It was being accounted for by the Liberal government as gross domestic product. So Trudeau and his government could point to how great Canada's economy was growing. Look at the numbers. The numbers are great. The GDP is up. That means, and people's property values are up and everything. So everything's rosy and great. But it's all smoke and mirrors. And it's a real estate bubble. And if for whatever reason that bubble bursts and the real estate market collapses, here in Canada at least, the results will be catastrophic, because you will have millions of Canadians who are paying mortgages on properties whose now they'll they'll go into default automatically because the property value will become less than the mortgage that they're paying on it. It's, in other words, very similar to what happened in the United States during the subprime mortgage crisis, the financial crisis of 2008, if you recall that. So this, in Canada at least, this is a bubble that's just teetering on collapse, and Trudeau is now wrapped up in scandals, and there's much talk of him having to either step down or prorogue Parliament. Either he will try running again in election or not, but he's trying to cling to power. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but he's caught up in scandals. His finance minister, Lisa Freeland, has already resigned, and so there's a great deal of uncertainty, just financially and economically, in my country, where I live, and this could precipitate a cascading collapse of the economic and social fabric here in this country. And Trump, who is no fan of Trudeau, no world leader likes Trudeau. Trudeau is Peter Zayin referred to him as basically a failed drama teacher. Forget about elder statesman or prime minister or whatever. He's a failed drama teacher who's basically been pretending to be Canada's prime minister for however long. But he's been so charming, and the liberals, those on the left, the woke in this country, are so indoctrinated. He's been able to basically play Pied Piper for 12 years, and he's been leading all the woke liberals and woke intellectuals in this country, just by playing the tune on his just as the Pied Piper does. But it's coming to an end, and Trump has gone public. He's made public statements about how he can't wait for Trudeau to get out of office so Canada can choose a prime minister of some value and worth and common sense, who's serious and intelligent and can actually roll up his sleeves and get to work making proper deals with our trading partners and the rest of the world, and getting on with the business of actually managing a nation and engaging with the global economy. So that is another aspect of that really is just came to a head at the end of 2024, in the same way that the election in 2024 in the United States may be the defining moment of the year. What's happening right now in Canada with Trudeau's government is essentially collapsed already, because Parliament has broken for Christmas break, and the first act of Parliament when they return will be a vote of non-confidence, which will force an election unless Trudeau prorogues Parliament, which would basically be Trudeau taking a step of a dictator in order to an attempt to stay in power. So that's where we stand going into the new year in Canada. But I think you will find around the world this sorts of tension and this sorts of things coming to an end, or things coming to a head, and a breaking point, and 2025 going in a new direction. That, I think, is going to be a common theme no matter where you are in the world. Benjamin says, exactly, it would cost 1/2 of one's earnings from owning such a property. Yeah, I mean, at one time, Tiffany says a Canadian chess game. Benjamin's comment here is that when he refers to 1/2 of one's earnings, there was a time when the typical financial advisor would tell you not to spend more than 1/3 of your earnings on housing, whether you're renting or owning, like whether it was rent or a mortgage. to reasonably survive, and with some, and having discretionary income, and to put away some savings for a rainy day, they would always advise not to spend more than 30% of your gross income on housing. But as Benjamin is describing here, well, most people in Canada are spending well over 50%. Well over 50%, which means they have very little discretionary income for spending, and they have no opportunity for savings whatsoever. And that's really detrimental to an economy. That means the whole economy is teetering, is on the brink, because if everybody is so stretched, and it also means that whether it's discretionary income, or whether it's like, doing things like automobile repairs, or home repairs, or replacing appliances, which people have to do a lot these days because the appliances last. If you get 5 years out of an appliance, you should count yourself lucky. Most appliances last like, what, 2 to 3 years, and they have to be replaced. So, and when your stove dies, you have to get a new stove, right? Like, there's no option. When your refrigerator dies, you have to get a new fridge. There's no option, and there's no ability to repair these things like there once upon a time. So you can't repair them, you have to replace them. So this is where so many families get into the debt cycle and the debt loop, because everywhere you go, the first thing they want to do is they want you to finance your purchases. So, don't buy the car, lease the car, right? At the low rate of 0.85 APR, 1.5 APR, or whatever, right? Because most of the car companies in North America aren't even car companies anymore. They're finance companies. General Motors is a finance company. That's how they make their money. They practically give the cars away for free. Not for free, but they make no money on them. They break even or they lose money on the sale, but they make up that money on the financing of the car, of the vehicle. That and the service schedule, right? So, in other words, they want to get you trapped. They want to get you into that contract, and they want that monthly payment from you. That's what they want. And whether it's your cell phone company, or the company where you buy your appliances, or your furniture, or your automobile, or whatever it is, you'll notice when the flyers come in the mail for these big ticket items, they might show you a price, but underneath it, they will always show, or as low as $69.99 a month, right? It could be $1,000 mattress, or $1,000 bedding, or whatever it is, right? $1,000 appliance, $2,000 big screen TV. But then right underneath there, right underneath the price, but the low price, but the low monthly payment of, or 4 equal payments of, and so on and so forth, right? Everybody wants to get you on that monthly payment program, because psychologically, right, $2,000 or 48 months at $50 for $49.99. Wow, that $49.99 psychologically, that looks so much better. And buried in that $49.99 a month is whatever interest rate that they don't tell you, or the interest rate is in the fine print, or the interest rate, or they'll have whatever 2.9 APR or whatever next to it. But the way that the math on that works out, you end up paying much more for that $2,000 big screen TV. But because it's broken up and spread out, it doesn't feel like you're paying more. It feels like you're paying less. But this is all debt. This is all people getting on that debt treadmill and that debt cycle. And consumer debt is at an all-time high in North America. People are stretched to the max. And with the inflation, the cost of living, right, the value of the American dollar, the value of the Canadian dollar is even worse. It's way worse. We can barely barely buy 60 cents on the dollar, you know, with Canadian dollars. So so something's got to give, and this shift to the conservatives, certainly in the West, it's because we're going to have, unless something catastrophic happens here in Canada, our next government will be a conservative government. But if the pendulum swings too far the other way, then the exploitation of corporations and banks will be primed to take advantage of a very weak populace and a desperate populace. And the machine, right? The big machine is in self-destruct mode. That's what we have to appreciate and understand with all of this. Okay, mechanical nature operates according to set laws, and entropy is a law of mechanical nature. Nature does not fight against its own laws. It may appear that way on an individual basis when the rabbit runs away from the fox that's chasing it. But the fact of the matter is, mechanical nature needs foxes to catch rabbits. So it happens, right? Predators catch and kill and eat prey. This is just the circle of life. In the same way that grazing animals will eat plants and so on and so forth. I don't have to explain this. But when it comes to death, animals, you don't see animals fighting against old age and death. Or rather, death by old age. There's nothing that they can do. They'll run away from threats, but entropy is a threat that you can't run away from. And that's why so many, even my family dog, my dog Wolfie, 6 years ago now, he was 14, 15 years old. And one day, one night, we were all sleeping, and, he presumably got up from his bed in his little dog house in the house. He got up and he went down the stairs and he found himself a corner in the basement, and he just keeled over and died. There's a resignation, an acceptance when in nature, when an animal knows their time has come, and machines will run themselves to death. That's something that happened this year, actually, that comes into my mind. Was I had this very, very, very good, very strong lawnmower that we bought from Sears. And, Sears has been out of business for, a lot of number of years now. And this is a lawnmower we bought from Sears. I don't even know how many, like 20 years ago, maybe more than that. And it was an engine that was built in Hungary, of all places. And it was a 6 horsepower mulching mower. And the thing never skipped a beat. It was the best lawnmower I ever owned. It would just mulch everything up. I didn't have to rake anything. and it was again 6 horsepower. It's not a small engine. But this year, I was just, all of a sudden I'm just mowing the lawn as normal, and then all of a sudden it was just, I heard like crack, and then boom, stopped. Just stopped dead. And when I looked at it, trying to figure out what was going on, it was like the whole camshaft, the whole block, the aluminum block had cracked, and the camshaft was sticking out the side of the engine. It just up and died. It was like I'd always, done the all the maintenance on it, the oil changes and everything else every year, and there was no indication. It wasn't stuttering, it wasn't sputtering. It started on the first pull, but it was just the block. It was just the aluminum block, the metal fatigue, the wear on the block, the stresses had just finally, there was something in there that was getting weaker and weaker, and it just gave way. It just cracked in half, and the camshaft came out the side. And it was the same thing with my dog, really. My dog wasn't sick. He was old. He was slow, but he was still eating. He was still happy. Somebody came to the door. He went to the door. His tail was wagging. He was still active. He was still healthy. And just one day, he just went downstairs and died. Like the lawnmower, just one day, just up and died, like catastrophic failure. No repair, nothing that can be done. That's it. Period. It was done. There's something like that in the air. And 2024 seems to have experienced that in the West when it comes to this woke stuff. The mechanical nature had been pushing this woke agenda, but they overreached, they went too far, and they pushed it as far as it could go, and then it just kind of broke and collapsed under its own weight. Because they and now the pendulum has swung back to conservatism, traditional values, and so on. I think that over the next year, in the next few years, you're going to see a lot of traditionalism trying to exploit this opportunity. That conservatism and traditional values are going to try to exploit this swing back to the right. Because remember, the law of the pendulum and the oscillations between left and right or wrong, black and white, me and you, us and them, right? That's the binary duality. That's the oscillation of the pistons in the engine. That's the oscillation that exists in all levels of mechanical nature. And it's that oscillation that I was explaining in the video that I made this year, that I spent half the year making on Human 2.0. And it's that oscillation that as it becomes more extreme in its swing to either extreme, it separates and it pushes apart the two opposing factions until eventually it gets to a point where the distance between the two can no longer be bridged, and there's a collapse that takes place because most people are in the middle. Most people exist in the middle. So the Pareto distribution, as Jordan Peterson is so fond of. Let's get out the old. Let's get out the old handy. So if you're familiar with the Pareto distribution, it looks something like that. So you have the vast majority of people are somewhere here in the middle. and then you have the extremes. We call this, negative, and call this positive. And these are what they call the tails. And you have a very, generally speaking, a very small minority. Why? Okay, I thought I clicked it. There it is. So again, you have the majority of people here in the middle, and then you have a minority of people here in what they call the tails. But as the pendulum swings, right, between positive and negative, between the two extremes, and it forces the distance between these two extremes are pushed outward and away from one another. And this extreme here and this extreme here, they're weakening the hold on the center. It's like you have a bridge, but that bridge only has so much support, right? It only has so much support from above if it's a suspension bridge. So if you pull too far and there's too much separation, then eventually this whole thing will collapse, because there will be a breaking point. And the majority are in the middle here. The majority go down with that collapse. And now we were here, and now we swung back. I really should have drawn this the other way around, but you get the idea. But all of this is orchestrated. This whole thing is orchestrated by mechanical nature. And it's entropic. As the intensity of the swing, the arc of the swing, becomes more and more and more extreme, you get pulled more and more in either direction, and that weakens the connection. And so eventually it leads to a collapse. And that's the whole point. That's called entropy. That's called the death. That's called old age and death. Benjamin Raphael says, I think that is what they call the normal distribution, or the bell curve. Yeah, I know it as the Pareto distribution, but you're right. They call it the normal distribution, the bell curve. Yeah, what have you. The majority of people want to be here in the middle, especially when you think of North Americans or Canadians or whatever. But there's always the extreme forces. It's always the minority who have power and who crave power and want to control and manipulate the situation. They are the ones that have their hands on the controls. They are the ones that get their hands on the machine and want to shift the whole curve, right? They want to shift it either this way or that way. And so that's why the pendulum swinging back and forth, like we've, for the last decade, and since before COVID, the whole shift had been to the left. And in fact, we could probably even say that it was the last 20 years. Certainly since the Obamas. But now there's been a rejection of that. So if we were over here, right, there's going to be, the push is going to be to shift it back to the right. And that's because there's a whole contingent in the middle here. Excuse me. There was a whole contingent in the middle here that felt that the left had taken things too far, and they were not comfortable. They rejected how far the left had had shifted everything. So now the shift is going to be back in the other direction. But as pendulums go, it's not going to end in them. It's not going to stop in the middle. It's not going to get them back to the middle and then stop. It's going to keep going. Because remember, mechanical nature, this is the law of entropy that's driving all of this. So maybe in 2025, and depending on how radically the shift and rapidly the shift takes place, this could put a tremendous amount of undue pressure on the system in a very short period of time. So do you have the experience of taking an ice cold taking something out of the fridge, let's say, I don't know, you had some soup and it's in glassware, and you take it out of the fridge and you put it on the stove, you put it in the oven, or you put it in the microwave even, but you heat it up too rapidly. If you don't have the right kind of glass, you're running the risk that the glass shatters, right? Because if you either take something that's hot and you cool it down too quickly, or you take something that's cold and you heat it up too quickly, the stress on the molecular structure, it doesn't uniformly expand and contract, and so what you have is you have these ruptures happen in the fabric, in the substance itself, and you have the glass cracks or the glass shatters. Surely you've experienced something like that. If nothing else, you've witnessed an ice cube being dropped into a lukewarm drink, and you see how quickly, before the ice cube melts, it cracks because it's rapidly being warmed up. And the rigid molecular structure of the cold ice can't accommodate the rapid expansion, the rapid excitement of the molecules as it shifts from cold to warmth, and it causes a crack. And if there's enough stress being put on that which is cracking, then the whole thing ruptures and the whole thing can collapse. This is what happens with concrete overpasses in North America, because they use rebar, not rebar, rebar, or those metal, it's metal reinforced concrete, right? So there's rebar inside the concrete, but metal expands and contracts at a different rate than the concrete around it does. So that's why concrete overpasses in North America are always having to be repaired, because with the expansion and contraction of the increase and decrease in temperatures, and the extremes in temperatures in places in the north, especially here in Canada, the metal inside the concrete is expanding and contracting more quickly, because metal conducts heat better than concrete. So it will contract and expand and contract quicker than the concrete around it. So what happens is it creates micro fractures in the concrete around it. And then the moisture gets inside those micro fractures, and then you have all the problems of moisture getting into concrete and so on and so forth. And then again, you also have moisture getting in the rust, and so it's this cascading effect. It's this entropic effect where the concrete overpasses. They're good for maybe 10 years, but then huge chunks of concrete start falling off of them as the microfractures allow for more and more moisture to get there, and then that moisture freezes and expands again at a different rate than the concrete around it. And it's this the reason why I'm talking about this is to illustrate that this is a law of mechanical nature. This is a physical law that when change happens too rapidly and a structure, its mechanical nature, the fabric of that structure cannot accommodate that rapid change, then the substance of that mechanical nature will fracture as a result. And it's that fracturing, that breaking, that if the change is too rapid, too extreme, too quickly, that we can have we could be looking at some pretty serious rupturing taking place financially, economically, and because all of these systems that we have in place, they're all mechanical. They're all born of mechanical nature, and they're all mechanical in nature, and they all suffer stresses. And those stresses occur over time and due to extremes and extreme changes in the environment. And now we've had a colossal shift from the left to the right. It's like a colossal shift in temperature. And we have someone we have two individuals down in the States who have a reputation of being very mercurial and very kind of extreme in the way they do things and their approaches to things. You have Donald Trump and you have Elon Musk. And here in Canada, if Pierre Poilievre becomes the prime minister, he's not necessarily known for being mercurial and a radical, but what he is known for is being a very, very passionate conservative, and that he has something to prove. He has a chip on his shoulder. He has something to prove. And what he wants to prove is that he is worthy of being prime minister. And that means that he might want to usher in too many changes too quickly. And like I say, we have a very delicate housing bubble right now, and so on. If you like, there's a good example of a mechanical structure, and all it takes is a pinprick, right, for that whole thing to rupture because of the stresses that are on it. That's why we call it a bubble. Bubbles are delicate. So on a macro level, this is what we're facing as a humanity. And there are a number of different ways that rupturing can manifest. And one of the ways it can manifest is a major conflict, a global conflict, a world war. Benjamin Raphael says, based on our experience, we've observed that far left ideologies, such as those promoting extreme views on transgenderism or communism, often seem misguided. There's a saying in scripture that resonates with this perspective. The heart of the wise inclines to the right, but the heart of the fool to the left. This could be seen as reflecting broader themes, like the contrast between conservatism and capitalism versus liberalism and communism. This is true, but this comes with a caveat. The heart of the wise inclines to the right, but does not stay there, and is not stuck there. The heart of the wise inclines to the right, but very often leans to the left, which means the truly wise person is in the center. And a truly wise person, although they incline to the right, they know when it's appropriate to step over the line and be a progressive and a liberal. To take a liberal, free thinking, free feeling, free acting approach to any particular situation because of compassion, because of the particular idiosyncrasies. So the wise heart leans to the right, but is not enslaved there, and is not dogmatic, and is not trapped in the past, because the right is the past. The right is comfort and security. The right is control, and the right is order. The left is change. The left is freedom. And the truly wise individual does not look at the right and the left, like in the extremes, okay? They're both fools. Comprehend that. This is what the Bible doesn't say for some bizarre reason, but it should, because this is the truth, what I'm telling you now. The heart of the wise inclines to the left, right? It inclines to the right. It leans to the right, but it always has one foot in the left. But the heart of the fool leans either entirely to the left or entirely to the right. Those are both fools. Those are idiots. Those are fanatics. And that's the truth. I don't care how good-natured someone is. If they are a right-wing fanatic, they're a fanatic. And they will go down with this humanity. They will go down with the ship. They will not be saved by Christ. They will not be saved by God. God has no use for fanatics. Right? Like the Muslim fanatics who are blowing themselves up. Do you think God wants that? Can you even contemplate divinity demanding that and promising Vestal virgins as a reward for being a fanatical mass murderer? But that's fanaticism, right? That's idolatry. That's the projection of ego, because ego wants you either on one side or the other side, and never the twain shall meet. And it wants you in conflict with the other, because that's how it wins. That's how mechanical nature works. It's binary duality, and it's the oscillation between the binary duality. That's it. But the triune human being is trinary in nature. It's left and right. It's not left or right. It's left and right. To put it another way, right? Every king has a fool, a court jester. And every king, of all the people in the court that the king listened to the most and most carefully, it was the court jester. It was the fool. Why? Because it was the fool, the court jester, who was free to speak the truth that nobody wanted to hear. But the wise king who sat on the seat of power, sat on the throne, who was on the right, he was on the side of tradition, he was on the side of order, he was on the side of control and organization and hierarchy and all that of safety and security, of comfort for his people, right? But woe to the king who does not listen to his fool, his court jester. And we all have both our inner king and our inner fool. And woe to us if we do not listen to our innermost fool, the one who is free to think completely out of the box, the one who is free to take the consciousness into places of imagination and inspiration and action that the king would never even dream of. Because on the right, you have that rigidity, that solidity. It's the foundation. And you need a strong foundation, no question. The problem with liberalism is they want to tear down the foundation. They think that freedom is about having no foundation. They want to invert it. And they want to build a skyscraper, right? A monument to the gods of freedom, but they want to build it on a swamp. You can't have that either, right? Those are both fools. Who is wise? Right? The palm tree is wise. The palm tree, whose roots are sound and solid. His roots don't move. The foundation is strong. But how does the palm tree survive the typhoons of Southeast Asia and the South Pacific? By being a fool above ground, by swaying in the wind, by being able to dance and shift and move with the flowing, with the currents and the winds of change. You take a giant sequoia, you take an old growth oak tree from Europe, and you plant it in Southeast Asia. The first typhoon that comes through there, that oak is going to split in two. It's going to splinter into 1,000 pieces. We have to be flexible. We have to be able to dance. We have to be, as Bruce Lee said, we have to be like water. Water can flow or water can crash, but water needs a foundation. Water needs a containment. It needs a vessel, be it a lake or an ocean, that contains it, that holds it, that defines, that sets some parameters, and within those parameters, that water can flow. And you see, this is the dance between the masculine and the feminine, and between all binary dualities, is that there is an exchange between them. There's a dance, and it really is a dance. But if you've ever tried to dance with someone who's inflexible, who's rigid and robot-like, you know what a terrible experience that is. And you're not, number one, you can't enjoy your dance with them. And it's certainly not going to be a beautiful thing to look at. It's not going to be joyous and wondrous and filled with levity and filled with heart and filled with joy. No, it's going to be what it is. But if you've ever seen a couple dancing, and with a strong muscular man who can really lead his woman around, his dance partner, and he can toss her and throw her and catch her and lift her, and you watch a dance like that, you see the strength of the foundation in that dance, but there's also the flexibility and the give and take and the back and forth, where that strong masculine man leading gives up the lead to his partner, and the partner sets the lead, and he is following the lead of the woman. It takes a trained eye, it takes someone who dances to be able to tell when that's happening. But it's that give and take, it's that back and forth. The king must heed the jester. A wise man listens to the fool, in other words. Do not get trapped into the binary duality. I don't know from what book of the Bible this comes from, Benjamin. You'll have to tell me of that. But I take personal affront to this particular interpretation or translation of this particular verse, because this is not how it is, right? We're only talking, and if we're talking about the extremes, both are just outright fools. Both are idiots if they're stuck in their camp. And that's what that's where mechanical nature wants us to be. Mechanical nature, entropy, wants us to be stuck in our camp, right or left, conservative or liberal. My vision for Canada was to have something called centrist democratic progress Canada. To me, the middle road is the way. The middle road, you have one foot on either side. One foot is conservative and one foot is liberal. And sometimes you lean this way and sometimes you lean that way, because that's what a palm tree does. But the core, the foundation, is in the center, and it has very strong conservative values, but it also has very sound and strong liberal values. And that's what used to be called progressive conservatism in Canada, but then, something took, I won't get into the details of how this happened, but they dropped the progressive from the name. And again, that was a sign that happened 20 years ago. That was another sign of entropy taking hold, saying, well, we can't have this progressive conservatism in Canada. No. We have to have more extremism. So, in answer to my question, Benjamin says it's Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verse 2. Yang Sheng says, Happy New Year, Atlas. Thank you, Yang Sheng, and Happy New Year to you. And Benjamin Ochoa says, I think it's similar to synthesis, antithesis. Create a thesis of them both, like order out of chaos. Yeah, so the expression, Benjamin, is thesis, antithesis, synthesis. It's not creating a thesis out of them both. It's synthesizing thesis and antithesis, synthesized into a united whole that synthesizes thesis and antithesis. And that's what Human 3.0 is all about. But only the consciousness is able to do that. Right? That's the mind, the rational mind, has great difficulty doing that, because it is binary in nature. It's binary mechanical. This or that, us or them, right or wrong, black or white. The rational mind, the best it can come up with for synthesizing black and white, it calls it gray. And what does it do? It poo-poos gray. Oh, that's a gray area. People say that all the time. Oh, that's a gray area. It's a non-answer. It's like a blending of the two things. It doesn't mean anything. You can't define it. It's undefined. It's indistinct. It's undetermined. Right? It's a gray area. It's like a fog, like the fog of war. And the mind hates that. I've never heard of anybody refer to the gray area between black and white as in a positive way. They always say it in a kind of negative way. But to the consciousness, it's not gray, right? You've all seen the Tao. That's how the consciousness reconciles yin and yang, black and white, right? That's the symbol that's how the consciousness can reconcile that, because that's how it exists. It's the king and his court jester, right, in the court. And sometimes the king listens to his vizier, sometimes he listens to his court jester. But he never ignores either of them, and he never only sides with one and dismisses the other. Benjamin says, "Oh, sorry, messed that up." No, it's fine. It's fine. You are on the right track. You had all three components, just in the wrong order. So, entropy on a macrocosmic scale is causing these shifts, and there might be some dramatic shifts coming over the horizon. And again, they may be so rapid that they cause cracks, fractures in the substance of those mechanical systems. And the fracturing may lead to some dramatic repercussions, and one of them might be war. We can't rule that out. And all of that is on that macro level. So, what does this mean for you and I? What does that mean for us on our journey, on our path, in our lives? How do we take advantage of these changes? And I hope, for those of you who have been watching for a while, I hope you can intuit that for that which is mechanical within us to begin to break down, that those rigid structures start fracturing and weakening and even collapsing within us. I hope you can intuit how you as an individual can benefit and make use of that opportunity. All that you hold dear, all that you identify with, all that you are attached to, from habits to beliefs to behaviors to defects and vices, whatever it is that you suffer from and struggle with, or cling to and hold on to for dear life, to see those coming apart at the seams, the very fabric of that which in us that constitutes our mechanical nature, the very fabric of our mechanical nature unraveling before our eyes. This is a tremendous opportunity to reorient ourselves to ourselves, to that part of us which is not mechanical, which is that part of ourselves which is divine, which is not affected by entropy. And what's more, if these mechanical structures that are at present encasing and enslaving our consciousness, because we are so identified and attached to them, that's our consciousness is like bottled up inside of them, that these changes can lead to cracks in that fabric. And anytime you have cracks in a vessel or a containment field, and the fabric of that containment field is unraveling or rupturing or cracking, well, now there's a potential for the consciousness to escape. Anytime that changes occur, there's a disruption. And hidden within the word disruption hang on, let me just move this out of the way. We have this root word, to rupture. And this is change. Changes are disruption to the order. And that's why we call disruption to order, we call that chaos. But it's the chaos, the disruption, that leads to the rupture, which is the cracking of that fabric, is the tearing down of the wall, or the breaking, the chink in the armor, or the crack in the dam that can lead to the whole dam giving way, the whole dam bursting. Because when we think of rupture, it really is a bursting. It's a crack or a flaw or a pinprick. That's what a rupture is. But it's a bursting because of another word related to rupture called eruption. Like a volcano that has been simmering and smoldering and spewing smoke and ash, but it's been contained. And then all of a sudden the cap, the frozen magma cap that has been putting a lid on that volcano. There's a rupture, and as it ruptures, the pressure and the forces in the earth cause the eruption, and the magma explodes and flows out. We call it lava. When it's above ground, it's beneath the ground, it's magma. So there's a cap. And if you've ever popped a pimple or burst a boil on yourself, you've experienced this as well. How you have a boil or a pimple, a whitehead, right, on your skin, an infection of some kind perhaps, and you get this this boil, and then you squeeze it, or you take a pin and you put a little rupture in it, and then you squeeze it, and then the thing just bursts. It erupts. There are tremendous forces and pressures that have been applied on this humanity for decades now. And mechanical nature has been containing many of these forces, and many of these forces are dormant in Gen X. And it may be that 2025 is going to bring about the rupturing of the systems. But what's important for us as individuals is to recognize and take advantage of the disruption and allow the ruptures to lead to an eruption of consciousness within us. So the longing that you have to awaken, the longing that you have for self-realization, the longing that you have for a breakthrough in your life, in your purpose, why you are here. I feel very strongly that 2025 is going to deliver us many opportunities, many disruptions within us and in our lives around us, where if we are present and aware and paying attention, one eye in and one eye out, we will receive the guidance from within, and we will recognize where the chinks in the armor are, both within and without, and how to capitalize on those disruptions and precipitate the ruptures that result in an eruption of possibilities in our lives. Especially for those of us who have been dormant or relatively dormant for some time, just been building and building and building and building beneath a magma cap, just like that volcano, right? We're now ready to erupt onto the scene. But there's a disruption that needs to take place first. There's a rupturing that needs to take place. So I encourage you to keep an eye out for that, but also within yourself, for such changes, for such disruptions in your life and in your psychology. To the degree that you've been relying on mechanical nature and your mechanicity, and you witness that mechanicity just giving way and Yeah, and falling apart at the seams. This is your chance to slip through those cracks and step boldly forward on behalf of your higher self, because it's your higher self who's stepping forward through you, through those cracks. And once you surrender to that process, then the fabric of the mechanical self may still be there, may still try to cling and claw its way back into power, but once the cap is blown off the volcano, there's no putting it back on the volcano. Right? Have you ever tried putting the cork back in a bottle of champagne? New Year's is coming. I know many of you will celebrate New Year's with a bottle of champagne or a bottle of carbonated something, right? I don't have champagne because I don't drink, but I have basically they call it carbonated celebration drink, which is a terrible name. It's non-alcoholic champagne. It's some fruit juice that's been carbonated, but it has a very nice champagne cork in it and everything. So when you pop the cork on your champagne or non-alcoholic champagne on New Year's, after you've popped the cork and poured your champagne and toasted the new year and everything else, just, when everybody else has died down and going on doing their own thing, just try to put the cork back in that champagne bottle. See how well you do. And then remember this live stream and remember these words. This is 2025. I feel very strongly that this opportunity is there for many of us in 2025. And for that reason alone, you may start to see some changes happening on Attlas.ca, on Attlas Alex, on Attlas Information. In the last few days, I've received some information in dreams. And in the last few weeks, I've received some insights and information in a variety of different ways from a variety of different sources related to my work moving forward. And I don't think it's by accident that I fell ill in 2024, just a few days before the new year. And I feel very strongly that 2025, I'm going to be, erupting from the starting gate, bursting from the starting gate like a racehorse, because I've waited long enough, 51 years, and none of us are getting any younger, and this humanity is not getting any younger. And the swing back to conservatism, in a way that, at least in the short term, we have to ride that wave and take advantage of that wave where possible. And if possible, get to a good number of influencers and exactly what I said in the video that we need to do in the Human 3.0 campaign, that I was hoping that we'd raise some money to be able to do it, but no, I'm going to have to bootstrap it as always, right? I'm not going to be able to do it. And if anybody's, wants to help me, they have to make a commitment to help. I can't pay them to do it. And that's just the way it is. It just wasn't meant to be. It wasn't meant to work out that way. But the mission hasn't changed, right? I still need to reach the people of influence, the people of of resources, the people who have some modicum of power or influence. And the way that I plan to do that is maybe going to be a little bit different than how I've gone about doing things in the past. In fact, I know it's going to be different. How exactly, I don't necessarily know that. But I have some preliminary ideas and insights. And we're going to be pursuing that. Like I said, full steam ahead. Just as soon as I get over this. Just as soon as I get over this cold, whatever it is I have. And by the way, again, the only reason why I'm not slobbering and with runny nose and coughing and everything else right now is because I drugged myself with Dayquil, which is actually remarkable for controlling sinus symptoms and sore throat and whatever. But after we're done this, I'm through taking that stuff, because the fact of the matter is when you're sick, your body is trying to get everything out of itself. The runny nose and sneezing and everything else is trying to purge itself of the illness. So when you take these things to hold it back, you're prolonging the illness. So, but like I said, I didn't want to cancel today's live stream. Yang Sheng says, what do you think about the drones? It's interesting that you mentioned that, because this came up in some recent conversations that I had. There is an operation. It's known, at least in the conspiracy community, it's known as Operation. It's not. I can't remember what it's called. Is it Blue Book? No, it's not Blue Book. It's Blue something. Anyway, doesn't matter. It's possible that the drones, or what they're calling drones, that's it. Thank you. It's not Blue Book, it's Blue Beam. This operation is one that is a false flag, simulated alien invasion. It's one of the many possible strategies that the ruling elite will use to try to unite humanity under a single banner. And that is by creating the appearance of an invasion from a hostile alien force. Now, if you have ever heard of a fellow by the name of Bob Lazar, he is on record as saying that he has seen these high-tech flying devices, and that's maybe even an oversimplification, but alien technology that's been reverse engineered by Raytheon and Lockheed Martin secret skunk works in order to be able to, like, he claims that most of the UFO UAP sightings in recent years have not been aliens at all, but have been these test flights by Lockheed and Raytheon of these reverse engineered alien technology vehicles. And that the reason why they haven't gone public, or they're not being used in any applications yet, is because they're being reserved in order to be able to create a credible false flag operation of an alien invasion, because after all, who else but aliens could possess that kind of technology? But as soon as you let the cat out of the bag and have these things flying around at air shows, well, nobody's going to believe your false flag anymore, because they saw the glowing silver orb, doing figure eights and loop-de-loops at their local air show. So they know that, and then Raytheon was there with their banners and their logos on everything, saying, hey, look at our new technology, right? So this is basically, in a nutshell, that's what Project Bluebeam is supposed to be. The drones, according to Bob Lazar, are the first step, or maybe just a testing the waters of the first step, just because the fact that they were showing up on mainstream media and this and that, and it's like they might just be chumming the water at this point, or testing the water, seeing what the general feedback of everybody is, and perhaps even to determine to what degree the populace knows about Project Bluebeam. But it's funny how Bob Lazar was actually doing the interview circuit after these drones were showing up, and that all sorts of influencers had all sorts of crazy theories about it. And it's also interesting that Independence Day Resurgence, the sequel to Independence Day, that they were showing that on HBO just the other night. To what degree all these things connect, it remains to be seen. It remains to be seen, truly. But it would not surprise me if they do try to play this card at some point. It would not surprise me. But I can tell you definitively that there are no hostile aliens, and there is no alien invasion. There never will be. Because even if Raytheon and Lockheed have reversed engineered aspects of these devices and machines, they have only reverse engineered aspects of it, and maybe just enough to create convincing UFOs and UAPs, but they don't know enough to be able to actually travel to other planets, because it requires an enlightened humanity to be able to have interstellar travel. An intellectual animal and his physical materialist science cannot travel the stars. Cannot. Period. End of story. It is not possible, because you cannot travel in the third dimension between galaxies. The distances are too great, and you're limited by the speed of light. And the speed of light is too slow. So it's a non-starter. And what's more, the Masters of the White Lodge would never allow it. There's no way that this humanity, with its disease, with its infection of ego, is going to be allowed to go and infect other planets, because ego is contagious. If you didn't know, but you do know, because you've witnessed mob mentality, and ever since you were a kid or a teenager, you know what temptation is like. And the first thing when somebody's doing something that they that they shouldn't be, the first thing they do is they turn to you and say, hey, come and do this thing with me. Because they don't want to be doing it alone. They'd much rather corrupt you in the process. There's no way this humanity is going to be allowed to go out into the stars the way we are. Forget it. It's a non-starter. And if that's true for us, it's true for other humanities. And if we take Master Samael at his word, he says, if this humanity was just 5% conscious, or 5% more conscious, because we are 97% ego, if we had just 5% more consciousness on average, wars would be impossible. Think about that. We assume that all other beings in the galaxy must be like us. But we think that we're normal. We think that this degenerated fallen humanity is the way it is. Why? Because we have whores like that blonde one who freaking lives with the chimpanzees, convincing us that they're our cousins. And look, they're so much like us. We're so much like them. Oh, so we look at these chimpanzees going and raiding other chimpanzee groups, ripping chimpanzees, ripping one another apart limb from limb, killing their children, stealing their females. And we think, oh, well, that must be normal because look, chimpanzees and they're our cousins and we're animals and blah, 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 blah. We're so stupid. We're so ignorant. We think that this is normal. We think that you go into other planets and that other humanities with high civilizations and high technology able to traverse the stars behave like we do and watch ultra-violent entertainments and pornography and it's absurd. Our humanity is in hell. The whole reason why the other humanities are able to do interstellar travel is because they can remove themselves from the third dimension whenever they want, at will. And when you remove yourself from physicality into the supernal dimensions of pure energy, you're free of physics. There's no laws of motion. There's no gravity. There's no mass. If there's no mass, gravity, laws of motion, there's no limit. There's no speed of light limit. And you're not bound by materialist science, which is complete horseshit. Their science is so far and away beyond anything that our limited mechanical mind can comprehend because their science is conscious. It's conscious science. It's not limited by the machinations of the neurobiological AI and the fleshy part, in between our ears. Their science is not limited by that. And their longings, what moves them, what drives them, the purpose and meaning of existence for them, is not to dominate and conquer and own and control, least of all the virtual reality, the illusion, the Maya that we call matter, the physical universe. For them, it's a place to spend time. It's not the be all and the end all of anything. So the very notion that there is a malevolent, conquering, parasitic, whatever type of extraterrestrial possessing superior technology, that's a contradiction in terms. It's a contradiction in terms. Cannot, would not. It's impossible. It's impossible. Just as it's impossible for Raytheon and Lockheed to reverse engineer everything that's required for us to become a spacefaring humanity. We're incapable of becoming a spacefaring interstellar humanity because we're hamstrung by materialist science, by our physicality, by the illusion, the delusion that the virtual reality we exist in is real and is the actual nature of the universe. Benjamin Ochoa says, and Richard Greer, is it Richard? I thought it was David. Anyway, Mr. Greer said they were supposed to start this operation after 2025. He's surprised it's already started. Like I say, I think there's like testing the waters. I think they're testing the waters on it. That's what they're doing. And and like they're it's like the prelude. It's like the introduction, or they're warming people up to the possibility, and they're probably testing to see whatever it is they want to see. Benjamin Cho says, yeah, I forgot his name, to be honest. Richard Greer. Richard, you're thinking of Richard Greer, the actor. But as David Greer is the UFO guy. All right. Listen, everyone. I'm starting to feel myself stretched a little bit thin on today's live stream. I'm feeling it in my throat. I think all the drugs I pumped myself on to be able to do this today are beginning to wear off. So I would like to wish all of you a very happy and peaceful, joyful and prosperous new year, whatever that may be, whatever that may mean. But not so much in a worldly sense, although there's nothing particularly wrong with having worldly success, but more so from the point of view of what we've been talking about today. Oh, it's Stephen Greer is the UFO guy. Okay, Yangshe. See, we both got it wrong. I said David and Benjamin said Richard, and it's Stephen Greer. Okay, that makes more sense. Who's David Greer then? Anyway, see, I'm terrible with names. I don't identify with names. I'm terrible with names. But again, let's all of us keep our nose to the ground, our eyes open, and our ears open. There's going to be changes. There's going to be disruption in our lives on a macrocosmic scale and a microcosmic scale. But this is an opportunity for an eruption of consciousness, an eruption of change in our life, an eruption of that which has been holding back and waiting for the right opportunity to pounce. That's our inner Lion King, right? That inner cat-like patience. We can sit there and watch and observe and wait for the precise moment. That moment may be coming in 2025. And it is my my hope and my prayer for you, for all of us, that we be cat-like in that way, and that we surrender to our inner Lord and Master, our King of the jungle, and that we put ourselves at his disposal and live in that relaxed but ready state. This is not an invitation to tense up. This is not an invitation to live in anxiety or anticipation or stress, or no, you want to remain relaxed but in control. Controlled relaxation, at the ready, like a neutral pose in a martial arts class, where you're relaxed, but you're ready and you're observant. You're observing yourself and you're observing what's happening around you. And you are waiting for instruction. You're waiting for information, for insight, for intuition, for inspiration, for the definitive information where it says, yes, there, that, pay attention to that, and act on that in this way, so that we bring into formation in 2025. And I just was hoping to prepare you for the possibility that it comes as an eruption. In accordance with the disruption that we may be experiencing as a humanity, locally, regionally, nationally, globally. As above, so below, as within, so without, as in macrocosm, so in microcosm. Everything is connected, and we are all macrocosms in the micro. So if it's happening out there, it's happening in here. Let us not fall into victimhood. Let us not fall into identification or attachment. Let us not fall into shock and awe and analysis paralysis or deer in headlights when whatever is unfolding out there in the world, however and whenever it unfolds in this year or the coming years, let us not allow those winds of change out there and en masse and on whole and in the macrocosm to pass us by within. Let us recognize that if there is a disruption and an eruption of change out there in the world, let us be sure that we are also riding that wave of change and disruption within ourselves. This is key. This is key to not only surviving the Kali Yuga, but thriving in the Kali Yuga and using the Kali Yuga to its fullest potential, in order that we may express, that we may bring into formation our highest potential, which is our truest self. Our highest, truest self. That is the self-actualization that I hope and pray for you that begins precipitously in 2025. And as above, so below, as within, so without, I pray and hope that I may be an example, a living, breathing example of that self-actualization in the coming year, so that you see that it's possible, it's doable. And what's more, that each and every week, I'm going to be sharing it with you. I'm an open book. I'm going to be sharing with you the insights, the information, the changes, the disruptions, all of it. And hopefully you can be a witness to that. And I'll be doing it not for my self-aggrandizement, not out of mystic pride. I'm going to be doing it for no other reason than to be the guinea pig and the lab rat, for all of you to witness and analyze and observe and hopefully learn from, and hopefully recognize, to say, look, if he can do it, I can do it. That I hope and I pray and I feel strongly is the potential that's on the table for all of us in this coming year. And I will be here for you. And I hope that you will choose to be here and make use of that for your own sake and for the sake of the end of suffering of all beings. For that is the real promise of the disruption, the rupture and the eruption of the Kali Yuga. That all, like in the Chinese character, all crisis is opportunity. All right, we're gonna have to do it. That's where we're gonna have to. That's gonna have to do for today, for this week. I wish you all once again a very happy New Year, and I will give you a few minutes if you have any more comments or questions you want to ask before the end of the year, because this is it. And this is the 50th episode. We only skipped two days, two episodes this week. I don't think we've ever done 50 in a year, so this too was a bit of a milestone for 2024. Benjamin Raphael says, Happy New Year, everyone. Wishing you all joyful, prosperous, and fulfilling and a fulfilling year ahead. May it be filled with happiness, success, and wonderful memories. Thank you for today's live stream, sir. You're very welcome, Benjamin. Thank you for being here. Mugaboo22 says, so far, you have done just that. Inspire us to grow, no matter the circumstances or the setbacks. Well, I hope that we're going to continue that into the new year. And hopefully, Mugaboo, hopefully it's going to be at another level, right? According to the Alm of Life, right? And for me, this illness, the setback from the fall and everything, and getting through this dip it's before every great exaltation is a great humiliation. So I have received information, I have received insight, I have received direction that we're on the upswing now into January. We've gone through hell and we're facing our demons in hell, and you know what? It's child's play. I'm no longer looking at my demon as this overarching catastrophic colossus or whatever. You know what? It's child's play. It's just a game. It's just a game, and frankly, so maybe we'll talk more about it in the new year, because we're still in process. And like I said, this being sick and everything is all part of the process. Remember, we got to descend into hell before we can ascend to the next level in heaven. And Mugaboo says, very consistent. 50 out of 52 is great. Thank you, Mugaboo. Thank you again. Hopefully, we'll see you again in the new year. Benjamin Ochoa says, okay, Happy New Year. Thanks for today's stream. Health and success for the new year. Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your questions, your input. It's always much appreciated. What else can I tell you? I might watch the Lord of the Rings trilogy on New Year's Day. Not New Year's Day, New Year's Eve day. I've done that in the past, and I've told you that the first time I did that, the Ring of Power was destroyed precisely on the stroke of midnight. I hadn't planned for that. I don't know how you could even plan for that, but I certainly hadn't planned for that. It just happened that way. And it was a completely magical, like, life. It was so incredible to experience that. And frankly, that particular year was a very another very important shift, another very monumental milestone in my life and in my journey. So I don't know exactly what I'll be doing on New Year's Eve day and on New Year's Eve. I know I won't be partying, but I don't know precisely what I'll be doing. But whatever it is, I just have this feeling that that we're on the cusp of another monumental milestone. So I wanted to express that in some way today with all of you, and that hopefully it will be for you as well. I really do hope and pray for all of us. And if you're here, we have a connection, and that's another thing, that reason why I'm so emphatic. Keep your, what's that expression? Your ear to the ground and your nose to the grindstone. But be relaxed and ready, because opportunity is going to be knocking. It might come in the form of a crisis, but every crisis is an opportunity. And so 2025, yeah, it's remember, 2 + 2 + 5 is 9. And if you go back and watch our Human 3.0 video, and you know all about 9, you saw it on the Tree of Life, the Divine Mother, and also about being an upright 9, and 9 being one away from a perfect 10, and being a upright 9 in our mind and heart and body. Like, it's 2025, it's could be the year. Could be the year. Let's not get identified and attached, or let's not have any expectations. Let's just be ready. Let's just be prepared. Okay. Thank you all. I want to wish you all Merry Christmas again, belated, to all of you and all of your families and all your loved ones, all you hold dear into the whole of this humanity. May have a joyous, prosperous, peaceful, happy new year. Inferential peace. Thank you, one and all. We'll see you in the new year. Bye, everyone. Take care.